All right. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to using entity bundle classes to build content types with built-in behavior. Today we're going to talk about something in Drupal that I think is both extremely powerful and just not well talked about, underutilized. And that's entity bundle classes. My goal is that you leave this session with a clear understanding of what they are, why they're useful, and how they can help you build content types that just don't describe their structure and how data is stored, but how the content type could describe its behavior. My name is Jim Vomero, and I'm an engineering manager at 4 Kitchens. I've been working in Drupal for over 15 years, and I use it for all my nerdy hobbies, from homebrewing beer to planning retro arcade projects to teaching kids how to survive a zombie apocalypse at our summer camp. That's true. If you have any questions after this presentation, I'd love to talk shop. I like to keep these conversations going. There's my handle and Jim on GitHub and Drupal.org and Drupal Slack. Let's talk. And I'm a web chef at 4 Kitchens, where I spend most of my time working with higher ed institutions. We do a lot of nonprofit work as well. We, as a company, are working with industry-leading organizations that educate, advocate, and inform. So today's talk, I'm going to start at the beginning. What happens when you build a Drupal website? And it's usually building out content types. It's one of the first key moments. I'm going to show an example with news and events and stories and landing pages. And those are all content types that are mostly defined by fields, usually with little or no code. It's all stored in the database, also exported as YAML, so it's highly structured, easy to configure, easy to maintain. This is something Drupal is historically great at. It's the go-to power, why I will choose Drupal over another tool for a project. But over time, as that website develops, something interesting happens. That content, it starts to accumulate different behaviors. So you might have some types of content that will appear on the homepage, and only those will. Maybe some show up in news feeds and others are hidden or filtered by default. Some content might behave differently in search. Parts of it are excluded or hydrated in a certain way. And then you might even have special publishing rules or validations on save or access controls. And gradually all these pieces of business logic start finding their way into all the different modules. And they become these behaviors that are hidden in your code base. I have some examples of where they could wind up. You probably know these rules. They're in custom hooks. They're in maybe a service you write. You might find them in a hook or an event subscriber. You might even see something like that tucked away in a hook or a route subscriber. Can you tell I don't like hooks? Like, it's a major pet peeve of mine. If you can't tell, we have to use them, but I have a vendetta because after 5 years of working on a project, it's hard to figure out which one's winning when, which content types or entity types or configuration bundles, when is this code firing? And even sometimes when you find the right hook, it's in layers. And well, in this example, we have a simple bundle check looking, is this an event? Let's do something to this node. Or maybe the fancy one, an event or a story in array. Yeah, hacked it. They could also show up, this is classic, where you have the switch case, everything ends up everywhere in a conditional. Or my personal favorite, when sometimes even within those, you have that growing logic. The last one was if, else if. This is the switch case. It just starts to take over. And are you breaking at the right time? Maybe you've exited a function and you needed to stay in there. It's difficult. It's difficult to know where you're at. When this behavior isn't modeled directly, it's all these sort of indirect conditions sprawled throughout your code. Something interesting happens. And this is a very old design problem. Pre-Drupal, it shows up anytime we try to model complex systems by putting things into categories. In this case, I'm going to talk about content types, but anything structured data is going to have this kind of a problem. So to illustrate this idea, let's step away from Drupal for a second, look at a different system, and let's react to something that you might have experienced a long time ago. Most of us have encountered an object-oriented programming course at some point. Maybe it was at a boot camp or at a university, and you learned PHP, Java, C#, object-oriented programming is everywhere. For better or worse, people have opinions on it, maybe because of what I'm about to say. And if your experience was anything like mine, the lesson usually starts out like this. Here's a class. We can instantiate it. Now it's an object. It's reusable. Oh, and there's 4 pillars. That first one, we're going to call inheritance. And this lets us pass along properties and methods from a parent to a series of children. And then there's a bunch of other stuff that maybe you remember, maybe you don't. I don't know. Kind of a hint, this is the direction I'm going. The fact that most of us, I'm going to assume most of us can't name all of these things, or at least talk about why they're important, is maybe one of the reasons we mess up on these structures, or we as a community don't have a standard way to talk about them. Because there's more to inheritance, but inheritance is one of the easiest things that you can demonstrate. You have a thing, you extend it again, and you have this nice hierarchy. And that becomes synonymous with how we think about object-oriented programming. So the classic example, I don't know why it's always pets or automobiles. I have a pet class. It's abstract. It can't be defined on its own. It could eat. It could speak. Then I have a dog, right? The dog's going to woof. I have a cat. That extends it. That's going to meow. You might have properties that are unique to that subclass, that child. The cat has 9 lives. The dog, all dogs, that's right, go to heaven. Millennials, help me out here. These become the classic example of inheritance, but it gets away from us so quick because there are constantly missing pieces as you scale up and you start building real structures. What are those other principles of object-oriented programming? Where are they missing? And why are things not fitting? For me, it's a lot easier to talk about these things when we zoom out, talk about something unrelated, get our brains out of Drupal for a second, and talk about something a little more abstract. So let's talk about superheroes. I've been reading a ton of comic books with my child. So let's imagine how we're going to represent superhero powers. Oh, good, a demo. That's way more fun. Let's check it out. I'll have a link to this in the slides. We're going to create some objects about superheroes. And I have an abstract class, a hero. What can a hero have? It might have a name, an alias. Not all of them do, but a secret identity could be the alias or it could be the other way around. They belong to a universe, DC, Marvel, something else. They have a power level, and we can think of any number of these. And then we start to break them down, because not all heroes are in the same types of family or clan or really in the same types of story. So let's just start easy. 2 of them. A hero. You could have human and superhuman. Let's do this together. I have Batman over there and human. See, Spider-Man, that would be superhuman, I would think, because there's like Spidey sense. That's not a normal thing. I don't have that. We joke. Iron Man, though, that would be a human, so that's easy. It's a person inside a robot, but the hero I don't think is human. We could debate it later. Actually, a bunch of nerds debating this would be the perfect way to finish today if I see you all at the social. Captain America's superhuman, although kind of doesn't look like some of the other superhumans. Looks human, acts superhuman. Green Arrow might be really skilled, but I'd say that's human. Superman, now I had a problem. And I mean, because I can't do this. There's someone would call me out. Say, Superman, adopted by Earth, not a human. Not a superhuman, because that says human in it. It's something else. Doesn't fit. And we can already argue some of these other ones don't fit, so let's get more complicated. Add a third. That's the easiest way to scale this up. Just add another child. Clean separation of concerns. We have another one called extraterrestrials, which will have its own sorts of properties that are different from humans and superhumans. And now I have Superman, Starfire, Thor. Everyone fits. Everyone wins. Oh, I got a few more. So we got Cyborg. Cyborg's half human, half robot. That's not a superhuman. This is where I get stuck. All right, I got Nightwing. Hawkeye's basically a bow and arrow. Let me try it again. Moving it over. All right, let's get a little more complicated. This is inheritance fun. Oh, come on back here. Well, we know where it's supposed to be. We can break those down and make this hierarchy even bigger. So for our humans, I'm going to break them into 3 categories. And now maybe this fits a little bit better. So for our weapons type, that's the people maybe throwing something or shooting something. I got Batman because he's got the utility belt. For combat, they might use some different tools, but their power really comes from their discipline and what they learned. Prosthetics or prosthesis, we have folks wearing suits, or maybe a limb is made of something that's extra special. All right, we got this. Now those people fit. Superhumans, animals enhanced in magic. I love it. And then extraterrestrials, actually, okay, so this kind of works. And if I sound unsure, it's all an act, so follow me here. I have weapons in 2 categories now. I have humans with weapons, that's a child class. I have extraterrestrials with weapons. Extraterrestrials that their power comes from combat, I would think, and then superhumans whose power is, human also with combat. I have a lot of duplication now. I have multiple abilities that are spanning this, and this is just with 2 levels. Very quickly, this could scale up. Let's add another one. I'm going to move Blade onto this. Now, Blade is human vampire. That's not actually a human pass. Pass on Blade. Rocket Raccoon is an animal. That's pass. Black Panther is magic, pass. Star-Lord. Star-Lord is from Earth. He lives in space. Pass. Crypto's a dog. That doesn't even remotely fit in this chart. All right, a Superman, Supergirl's dog. I'm not sure whose dog. All right, last try. Help me out, y'all. I'm going to add a few more categories of this thing. And in case you're curious how much time I have in my free time, I could show something like this to my boss and say, wouldn't it be cool if I built this chart out even bigger and get the question, is that a good use of your time? And I'll say, no, sir, that is not a good use of my time. So I only built out the first leg of it. But we now have weapons down to the mystic, the cosmic, the traditional, the high-tech, different types of strength, mental agility, brute force, different styles of martial arts or skills, mimicry, acrobatics. I now have a place where I could live happily, except one problem again. I can't even zoom in enough for y'all to see it. This stuff coexists across different categories. And I wind up with these class names just to generate a handful of characters. It's going to be class hero is extended by mechanized, extended by suit, extended by power armor, just to describe a few types of heroes. This is the inheritance abuse that we often think of with object-oriented programming. And it's why those other three pillars become so important. Now, I would love to do a talk all about design patterns. That's not what I'm here for. I just want to allude to them, show them to you, and at the end of this talk, you say, Jim, how do I get started? I'll say, go read a design pattern book, and it's gonna give you the next steps. I'm going to introduce the concepts of one, and this is going to be talking about, and I remember my boss telling me about this in my first job. They would say composition over inheritance, and it took me almost 15 years to figure out what that meant. No matter how many times I heard it, I kind of smiled and I nodded. It never clicked. And I think this is the good example, where instead of baking these powers and these taxonomies that I'm trying to put into each one of these characters, instead of baking that into the class itself, I make separate PHP files, separate services, or whatever I want to call them, to compartmentalize that. So maybe I have a number of behaviors. We'll call them behaviors. You might see them as strategies is another term for what is their form. Are they human? Are they humanoid? Are they robot or android? Something fantasy, something animalistic. And so, Spider-Man is, I would say, human, even though the powers are from an animal. The physical form is human. What is their travel behavior? Spider-Man swings. So we pick that one. This becomes a choose your own adventure where you can take one hero and just add the classes that apply to that. And then any of the methods, properties, interfaces that are associated with that. And in PHP, we might use traits and interfaces and various levels to compose our classes come together. And I have a few examples of that. Here we go. I have some Avengers here. Spider-Man is a human with tactical combat, agility. Their defensive power their powers came from an accident. Their defensive powers and agility. They swing and they have a secret identity. The other two do not have a secret identity. Iron Man is a leader. And so this becomes a great way for us to pick and choose which pieces go together. And this is the core of it. Let's make this more tactile. So like, Jim, why are you doing this? This is so hard for me to follow. That's okay. I'm going to immediately jump into my content types. So for today's demo, I've created content types like news, which is post like a blog post versus chronological order, but more relevant is the recent posts. I have announcements. That's something that's maybe only relevant for a little bit of time. Stories, which are long form content that are probably evergreen and can be featured in different ways across a site. I have something called shorts, which is short-term videos. So think about your YouTube shorts or TikTok posts. All of these are content that you might promote somewhere that have different qualities. And so I just gave 3 categories of these strategies. What is its presentation? What is its distribution? And what is its interaction? And when talking about behaviors, I like to find the way to put the word able at the end of it. So is this content tileable? Can I make a grid to show what this content looks like? Maybe not. Maybe a video wouldn't fit in that. Is it authorable? Is there a byline and sort of the attribution and publishing stuff? Or maybe not. Maybe that's not really inherent to this content type. Is it pop-upable? Yeah, you can put able on anything. That might be our alert. If there's some sort of major banner that you click on it, it pops up, says this is an important message. Flash sale at the comic book store, and then you could dismiss it. You wouldn't want to do that with a product necessarily. A product is going to want to have its own page with its own metadata and its own curated content. Distribution, similar. Is this going to be in or out of the search index? How do we treat it? In or out of fields? Is it something that's internal only? Is it something I can promote on places like the homepage? Or interaction. For each of my content types, is it shareable? Is there like a native link? Maybe I'm using the browser APIs to share it. I'm not going to want to do that with everything. I could, but not all content is maybe deemed shareable for your strategy. Is it actionable? Is there a button? Events, there's probably a register button. For news, maybe share, read more, I don't know. Probably not actionable. Purchasable or commentable, that's tough. The idea is these are all strategies or behaviors that you might want to say apply or do not apply to a content type. And I just have a few examples here where that announcement is something that pops up. And I could promote it by making it very relevant on one or more pages. And maybe it can be for internal only. I want an announcement only to my inner circle as they log into the website. An event, though, that's unique. I definitely want to share it. I want it to be actionable. I want to be able to have a call to action that's prominent. It's baked into the different templates. So this, I think, is my best attempt at talking about composition over inheritance. And what does that mean from a practical standpoint? Instead of trying to bake all of these ideas into a single content type or even share it through services, we're going to compartmentalize those. And there's some really wonderful strategies online. We could talk about them at the happy hour afterwards. But there's some great, in fact, the best one maybe to start with is the strategy design pattern. If you want to think about a way to swap out these different behaviors on a content type, that is one of the most approachable ones. Just look up the duck example. That's a good one. Rubber ducks don't quack. That's all you need to know. From here, we should look at some code. Enough talk. Actually, I think that's my next slide. Let me double check. Yep, enough talk. Let's see some code. I'm going to keep talking, though, but we'll look at some code. Let's see, I have two examples, one just for today for us to hypothetically talk about how this works, and another one from a site I'm about to launch. So some practical, concrete examples as well. So in this first one, I've created a comic book store. Might as well keep my code going. And I'm going to show you the more modern way to get started. As after I bashed hooks, it turns out I need a hook. So our first hook is going to say that for any of the content types I want, and I have some tips on which ones to opt in, I'll share at the end. Any of the content types that are of interest to me, I may say, let's look at another class to find out additional definition for it. I'm not replacing the node interface, I'm just specializing nodes for one topic or another. So I've created one for each of my content types. Actually, there's some I've skipped because I didn't want to customize the basic. Oh no, I do have a basic page there, but there's nothing in it yet. But news, we're going to look at the news one, the story, that's that long form content, event. I'm probably going to pick on these three the most, where I have declared them just here as an associative array so that on this hook, and I am using entity bundle info alter, which is what you're going to use for content types, paragraphs, anything that's pre-existing. If you're creating your own entities, you're not going to use the info alter, you're going to use the info hook. And I'm just saying, let's set the bundle class to that PHP class. So this is the wiring, letting Drupal know that I have a custom class for it. I've already have the content type. Let's look at an example of one of them, I think. That's probably the best way to do it. It doesn't matter where I put them as long as I'm consistent. This is probably one of the bigger challenges of doing this kind of work. If I'm going to create a custom bundle class, I'm going to do that once. So I need everyone on my team on the same page of where and how we work. Usually it's something top level, can't be changed. I think I called this one Comic Core, a module I'm never going to turn off. I can't override this multiple times. I can only set this one time, but I can do as much work in there as I want. I also want to make sure my naming convention is consistent. So for me, I put all of this in an entity folder. Okay, let's check that out. I'm moving around because I had to zoom in really good so everyone sees the characters, but if anything's clipped off the screen you really want to see, let me know. I'll do my best to try to fit it. Here is my story content type bundle, and it's inheriting from Node. There is a Node interface that has your get title, it has your publish, your save, your pre-save, all of the things that a Node knows how to do. I just want to add my own things on top of it. And one of the first things I want to do is talk about how to feature this as a post. If I have a list of posts, I want to feature one with a big comic BAM on it, like Batman, POW, that kind of a logo. And I need a way for this content type to describe its relationship to that behavior. So I'm calling that featurable. There is a featurable interface on this custom PHP file I created. I can share all this code. Featurable interface, let's look at that. An interface is going to tell us what is required. So let's see. I put them all in a folder called behavior, I believe. That is just the naming convention I'm using. You can put these wherever you want. So featurable interface. This defines content that can be featured in a list. It's going to be visually featured. And if you implement featureable interface, you must have a method called isFeatured. So any content type that wants to be featured is going to have a method called isFeatured. Let's find it. Let's find it in our node. So what's that story? There should be, here it is featured. It turns out this content type has a checkbox on it called field featured. If somebody checks that box and then somebody else wants to check, is your node featured? It's going to return true if that box is checked. That's probably pretty underwhelming. I have a checkbox and my node is now aware that it's checked. I guess the only thing I've done here maybe is I've given it some actionable language. I asked, are you featured? And it's like, yeah, I'm featured. You checked the box. But these are bundle classes. I could take that same method and apply it in a different way. Let's check out news. News, I did it a little different. So for news, I am saying, yes, check if that featured box is checked, but always return false if the news is older than 45 days. So I'm able to set specific rules just for the news content type. I'm featured if I'm fresh and that box is checked. Otherwise, it's going to default to false every time. So this is a way for me to take that business logic that all of this would have been in some sort of hook at some point with like switch case statements saying for this one, this is what featured means. For that one, this is what featured means. And probably actually write in a template pre-process or something, it would have gotten lost. And I'm able to take what's not the most complicated business logic and give it its own meaning. So I can say node is featured, and it will say yes or no. It's going to return a Boolean based on this business logic. Let's look at one more. An event. So here is my event bundle class, and I just called it event node. I put it in an consistent folder, and I said it implements featureable interface, so it has to have that method, is featured. And for this one, if the event is passed, always return false. That makes sense too. I don't want to feature past events. There might be use for that content, but I'm not going to feature it. It's going to be a competing priority. So now I have a spot where there's different ways, different business logic for each one of these content types represented in a formidable, consistent way. I hope that was a good introduction. I don't think I've lost anybody yet, but feel free to interrupt if you have any questions. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going because I got a few more and probably not enough time to show everything. I made some more interfaces. I have one called teaserable. Yeah, you can make anyables. It happens. And so for this teaserable interface, I used a trait, not something we're accustomed to using too often in Drupal. So a trait is going to be logic that I can share across all of my content types if I choose to. So let's look at the teaserable interface. You don't need to do these interface and trait stuffs to do a bundle class, but I think that's the point of my session right now, is this is an opportunity for us to standardize things in a way that's sort of modern programming. Let's look at teaserable. Teaserable trait. What is a teaserable item? A teaserable node is a node. Oh, I didn't mean the trait. I meant the interface. A teaserable node is a node where you can get the summary, get the call to action label, and get the URL. You have to have those three URLs, those three methods present. Now, what I realized is most of these pieces of content actually had the same logic. I don't have to put something in each one of the bundle classes. I take the common code, I'm going to put that in a trait, and just share it. So for pretty much all of these, if not all of them, get teaser summary is just check the field summary, and if it has some text, return it. I'm doing some cleanup as well. To get the canonical URL, just get the node's URL. So I can override these if I'd like to, but at the default, I have some basic methods that I can now apply to my content type. That's in the trait. So when I go back to, which one were we on? Probably, let's do news. Sorry, it's short. There it is, news. And we'll double check that this is, yep, it is teaserable. It has that teaserable trait, so those methods are already on here. I only have to override them if I feel like it, and I don't think I did. So there is the is featured. Oh, I did here. I'm saying that the call to action for a teaser for news, but news only, is read update. Probably not the best text. I could do better. But I wanted to show off an example of how you get those traits in place so that we can share code across content types try to encapsulate all that behavior into a single source, but you can still override them if you want. You want to limit overrides, and that's where design patterns get to be in play. We don't have time for that. Take a look. I have another trait here that I'm just going to mention called read time behavior. Read time behavior. And that is the one that's going to calculate how long would this take to read. It's a simple, in this case, I used a service. So I have a service that will, I think it's just calculating, it's dividing the length of the article by 220 words per minute. And it's going to return an int saying how long that takes to read. If I go to a story content type, I'll see that I am implementing the read trait behavior. There's nothing else here. Everything I need is in that behavior, which calls the service. So I'm not summarizing. I'm not done with my examples yet, but I do want to just go back to this diagram that might have seemed not that relevant too long ago. I am doing this same thing right now. I'm taking all of my behaviors that I want to apply to my content that aren't innate to the fields themselves. I'm giving them custom places that exist that might be a trait or a service. If I get really complicated, I might use the Drupal plugin system, and then I'm just applying them to that individual bundle class. I have a lot more I could show off on this. I should at least show a demo. I'm not a front ender, so you're going to get something pretty generic. There's a story for me. Ooh, look how nice. And I have a list of what this looks like. This is just a Drupal view where I am using that teaserable set of methods to consistently get an image, a title, the read time, a short description, and an action button if I have one. And on each one of these, I can customize what that means. And I think a good example of that, here's one that's featured. So here's a news story. One of the things I have on here is, and I could show it off, I added in the news teaserable, or in the news featured section, if you use the taxonomy term local community, you should be automatically featured. So you get the, in this case, POW across the top. That business logic only applies to news, doesn't apply to stories, doesn't apply to any of those other content types. And maybe this is kind of uninteresting, like every node has an image, but this is also a way to prepare for future growth. So let's say we're gonna add a new content type that's a gallery, and a gallery has lots of images. I'm gonna need a way to represent the business decision that someone's gonna make. If this is a gallery, use the first image in the gallery as the card teaser. That sounds fair enough. Well, I will have a place to put that because when I create my new content type, I'm going to add my new bundle class and I'm going to say, okay, this is teaserable content. I need this method that returns an image. And I'm going to say, use the first image in this file upload field. The field can have a completely different name. You can call an API, you can call an AI, whatever you need as long as it implements that interface. 2:30. All right. I have more examples. I'm going to hold them to the end. But just to describe them, in case I can pique your interest, I created a service for spoilers. Let's gray out some area if you contain some keywords or if you have a spoiler. I also have some validation in there. If someone checks a box that this article contains a spoiler, you have to answer a follow-up question on the severity of the spoiler. So being able to take things like validation and put them in a pre-save is a nice thing I can do with bundle classes. Any other ones worth teasing out right now? Hypeable content. Why not? Why not hypeable? This is content that I think is worth leaving the couch for, Boolean. Go for it. This might seem silly, but what I am doing is describing human or business meaning to something that would otherwise be a collection of fields we're describing, and so I kind of enjoy these names. Let's look at a production example. This is not in production yet, but it will be probably this month. This is a site I'm building for a student, a higher education-based organization that deals with standards, and they have a content type called a standard. Let's take a look at the nodes in here. I'll zoom in a little. So when looking at standards, the consumer facing of this is a React app, so you're just looking at the Drupal dashboard. I'm gonna just view one of these standards. Let's say collegiate recreation programs, and even though it's truncated, it's a bunch of standards. It's a lot of text. The whole purpose of this node is to get content ready for an AI to ingest it. And so I have a lot of business needs of what I need to do when someone makes change to this node to make sure it's correctly ingested. For example, if someone unpublishes this node, I need to unpublish all of that child content from the AI search index. Or if somebody makes a change to the parent-child relationships, I need to keep everything strictly in lock sync. And let's look at what that looks like in a real example. It was this one. In this case, and if you see a lot of examples about entity bundle classes, you Google it after here, you're probably going to see the more traditional hook as opposed to the one I showed you before. So entity bundle info alter, where I can set classes for each one. And there's that standard content type I just mentioned. This is indexed in a search index. It has child content. The child content is called knowledge. And here's one called resource that also has knowledge. The other two don't. Subscriptions and this custom assessment guide, these are not in the search index. As a result, if I check out, in this case, let me just zoom in a little bit more so you can see it. If I check out that bundle class that's referenced, I see that the standard node implements entity knowledge interface. Should have called it knowledgeable, missed opportunity. This is the way of me telling the system, you need all the methods necessary to do our search index logic correctly. So this knowledge interface is going to enforce whatever we need. I'll take a peek at it. It absolutely must have a get knowledge entities, which says get me all the children of this content. Set knowledge parent, where you have to set the parent on each one of the children. Set knowledge status. If I unpublish the parent, unpublish all the children. So any content type that uses the entity knowledge interface has to have those methods, and we do. If I go to entity, there it was, standard, entity knowledge interface, I have most of it in a trait. In fact, almost all of this is consistently the same, except one of them I do have to override, which is how do I get the children? Get knowledge entities. That's some complicated business logic. It means something to me. If I check out resource, this also says to get the children, or it has this entity knowledge interface. It has a method to get the children, but it's very different content. In this case, we're just checking one field as opposed to a series of many fields. So the differences of the content type are now self-described. Get knowledge entities means something. It's a behavior associated with that node, and it can be different per bundle. If it's the same, I might throw it in a trait to share it or a service or something like that. That was a lot to ingest. There's a recording. You can go back, check it out if you're gung-ho. I'm going to finish talking about the mechanics of this, and then by all means, I would love to answer any questions you might have. So if this is something you want to implement, step one, identify bundles to customize. Every one of these bundles I showed you is just a PHP class, and since all the examples you saw were for nodes, they just extended the node interface. So I created a new interface called event node interface extends node. And it let me, in this case, specialize an existing bundle. I didn't create a new content type. I still have the save method, what I can override. And in fact, I should have shown that off. In this resource node, I still have a save hook. And when you're saving a resource node, you're going to set the status. When you set save a standard, you're going to set the parent and then the status. So they have different save methods. So you can identify what needs to be in bundles so you can encapsulate it the right way. Second thing you're going to do is define those bundle classes. That's all the examples I had just shown you. Just a few tips. Make sure the namespaces are consistent. That's one of the biggest problems we always run into, especially when working through lots of files. A namespace is off. You're frustrated now. I would use clear bundle names with a consistent naming convention. If you're sharing this work across teams, it's very easy to get lost in the weeds. There's just a lot of Drupalisms flying around. It's actually one of the reasons I pick silly names is to give it not only personality, but some memorable factor that we're not trying to reuse the same words over and over again. I would also always extend node. So that's important. If you're doing paragraphs or custom entity, use something different. But you do want to extend an existing base class. Otherwise, you will get an exception. So for node bundles, the last thing you'll do is an example like this, or like the one I had shown earlier, using the hook inside its own file. But you're going to map them. You're going to tell Drupal through this update hook that your content type is using this new class as a customization. A few things: if this step doesn't work for you, double check your namespace, double check your files, double check your extending that original node. It's just over and over again I get tricked up. Moving behaviors into methods was sort of the next step. Start focused and short. Small changes are where to really begin here. If you find yourself doing a lot of things in hook entity, pre-save or save, this is a place to put that. So all the save rules for one content type go in one file. All the save rules for another content type go in another file. You don't have to do all of this. You don't have to start from scratch. You can start small. Your goal is to help the system not say, which bundle is this code for? Instead, it's saying, what does this object know how to do? What does an event know how to do that's unique to it? Oh, it's all in one file. I can read through that file with verbs and actions that make sense. And once you start moving those, once the bundle class exists, you want to start moving those behaviors into it. So think about all the places that in a typical Drupal code base where we check a bundle name and try to figure out where that behavior should be, you now have a place for that to be owned somewhere. This is like the real architecture shift for a lot of us, where we stop saying, just put it in a hook or which module, but you have to come up with a real disciplined place for this. We have that for fields, that all the field definitions go in a consistent spot, but all that extra custom code never had a consistent place before. A few design notes. Bundle classes become even more powerful when paired with those things like interfaces and traits and structured data and annotations. You might want to use services or plugins to encapsulate like-minded business logic. And as I had said at the top, this is the place where you start adopting design patterns, because what you're doing is you're starting to speak a language that software engineers have spoken for 30, 40 years as these design patterns have emerged, but never were a real fit with the hook system. Well, we now have a place that's organizing behaviors by content type. Cool, we can now move that part of our life into this space. A few suggestions. Adopt bundle classes incrementally. Don't try to design everything at once. Identify a repeatable bundle condition and then move logic into that. Small wins are kind of where you want to be. Make sure I don't miss anything here. Start with the most painful bits. For me, it's like event date logic and time zone fun. Let's put all of that in a reusable place and then share that across bundles. One of the examples I did show was the call to action. So for my event content type in that comic book example, I have a call to action, get call to action method. You saw that where it created a little button. If the event hasn't happened yet, it's a registration link. If the event passed, it's called a replay link. It takes you to a different spot. So being able to dynamically change that button out only applies to the event content type. It's nice that I have a single place to sort of put that behavior. And maybe the most important thing is don't let this become a junk drawer, because that's my goal, is to provide a place for structure. So just moving your junk into a bundle class saved you nothing and now is going to frustrate everyone involved. So the rule here, and I wrote it down because I didn't want to mess this up, is if the method that you're writing helps the object, the piece of content, answer a question about itself, then it's probably a really good use for a behavior in a bundle class. My last tip is document this pattern, because unlike hooks or event subscribers or some of the things that maybe fire in a sequence, this work does need to be consolidated and delivered in a consistent way for a single project. So if your team is working in different spaces, you may get lost and you might end up working against each other. Before I leave today, I just want to keep one thing in mind. Most of our systems that we build in Drupal start as something very structured, those fields, the content types, maybe configuration entities as well. And Drupal's really good at that kind of stuff. But the longer our sites live, the more stuff they accumulate, and all that business logic that maybe is even from your predecessor that no one quite knows why that line of code is in there is difficult to describe. You see the check, but you don't know the meaning behind it. So I'm hoping that what you're doing here, if you're able to adopt some of this work, is you're giving behavior a clear home, so you're not chasing it around a code base, looking for those hooks, looking through all the conditionals, switch statements. You're giving a spot. Maybe it's a service, maybe it's a trait, or maybe it's right in that entity bundle, and it's being described in a way that the content types can answer more questions about themselves. It's a subtle difference, but it really helps us understand the domain we're modeling. We've done that for fields a long time. This is maybe one of the first places, even though this has been in Drupal, I think since 2021, this is one of the first techniques for kind of organizing behavior in a meaningful way that is in lock sync with the configuration that we've been exporting. Because sometimes the best improvement we can make isn't just adding more logic, it's putting logic in a place that makes sense to us. Thank you all so much. Any questions? Please.
So when do you decide that it's time to implement something like this? Like, do you have any kind of rules? Like, oh, you're in an event subscriber so many times, you're checking, two different cases. Like, is that, hey, maybe I should refactor this, or do you have other rules that you're kind of looking at?
Sure. For the sake of the recording, when do you decide to start to pull these constructs in? And you give the example, you're inside an event subscriber, maybe there's some edge cases. The practical answer, of course, is it depends on budget and things like that. But philosophically, I try very hard to keep the things that are personal business requirements that maybe the website owners have outside of the construct that implements them. So a controller shouldn't be checking what's the taxonomy term ID of this page because I need to switch if a banner displays. Like, that's really specific knowledge that might have nothing to do with future content types. So if I find that if I'm writing a bunch of rules that manipulate only some of the objects that go through, it's like, no, this is a time to encapsulate. Remove that thing, and I'll usually put it in a service or a plugin or something like that. For bundles, you can start this right away with little consequence. And I think I've done it for almost every project my hands have been on lately for if the project uses paragraphs or like inline content blocks with Layout Builder, I will put all of those behind their own bundle classes just so I can do things like get image and it returns an image. And on launch day, it might always return the same image. It might be like field header. But at some point, inevitably, there's going to be a new content type or paragraph type that's a video. And it's like, oh, there's no image. Now I have to return the still shot, like what do they call a thumbnail or screenshot for that video. And so having a pattern where I could pass that back has been super useful. So feel free to experiment right away. But yeah, as soon as it feels like you've outlived the purpose of that container, event subscriber is a good one. Like event subscriber, I think is supposed to trigger that something's happening, not necessarily describe why you're doing it or who's doing it to it. I try to move all that stuff somewhere else.
Thank you. One more question.
Keep
What's
going.
your favorite design pattern book?
Head Start Design Patterns. It's a lot like me in that I will say the same thing as you've heard 3 times in a row because that's how I learn. I will say the same thing several different ways and folks are like, Jim, are you just unorganized? No, this is how I teach. If that doesn't work for you, then don't get that book. But it's a great book. It's written in Java, I want to say, but there are repos if that makes you uncomfortable. I find the examples pretty funny. If you don't like funny textbooks, then don't go that route. Some people want something dry. Otherwise, the classic is the Gang of 4 design pattern book. It's undefeated.
You talked about documenting this stuff. Where would you document? In the code itself or separately?
Definitely. I have been adding this like top level to the README lately as an architecture note because it's been so important to the way we work. But that's for our other developers, especially since this is kind of a shift. They might be accustomed to, oh, there's a bug, let me quick make a hook. They might not check that there's an entity bundle class. So I've been spelling this out pretty highly. And then in that hook, I've been trying to make sure there's a very established naming convention. So it's nothing that exciting. For me, I've been making pretty one-to-one relationships. So an event node is called event node. It's not that interesting. But if I make the pattern super obvious and I maybe even spell it out, it ensures the next person's going to do the same. There have been places, though, where we've had more clever naming conventions, especially if we own the entity. So that example of the higher education standard, the knowledge entity is something we completely own. And we've created our own naming convention, and I have just some comments right in the code. So the next person in there is aware, and when the next content type comes, I hope they follow the same pattern. I wish I had a better system, but honestly, I don't think anyone would read it if I put it in something like Notion or wherever. Any questions? Well, thank you all so much. Let my boss know that the room was standing ovations.